Okay, so this is going to be a demonstration of a few salient points about the pectoral region, which are not normally shown. So this is a supine cadaver, and we are demonstrating the left side, and the camera person is also on the left side. So here we see in front of us, the pectoralis major has been dissected out. This is the deltoid muscle, and this is the serratus anterior. So let's mention a few salient points right now. These fibers that we see here, these are the sternocostal fibers of the pectoralis major. And while we are at it, we can see that apart from the sternocostal origin of the pectoralis major, it also gets a few slips from the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle of the abdomen. And these are the ones we can see them clearly here. This is the clavicular head. And these two heads then converge and they get inserted onto the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Now, if you just take a look at it, the origin of the pectoralis major is so extensive, the insertion is so small. So obviously there has to be overlapping of fibers, and that is exactly what we can see here. We can see that these fibers, as they're coming, they are more superficial, while the lower fibers, they go deep. So therefore there is a twisting of fibers, and this twisting of fibers enables a big origin to be inserted in a small insertion. So the sternocostal head, by virtue of this type of origin, is responsible for medial rotation of the arm and adduction of the arm. The clavicular head is responsible for flexion of the arm, and the sternocostal head brings back the arm from the flexed position. The next thing I would like to draw your attention to is, before I reflect the pectoralis major, is this structure here. This is the deltopectoral groove. Why is it called the deltopectoral groove? Because it is the groove between the deltoid muscle and the pectoralis major. And we can see a prominent structure running in the deltopectoral groove here. This is the cephalic vein, which is one of the largest superficial veins of the upper limb. And if we trace the deltopectoral groove up here, we see that it becomes a triangular space here. This is the deltopectoral triangle, also known as the clavipectoral triangle. And as the term implies, it is bounded by three structures: the pectoralis major, the deltoid, and the clavicle. And we can see that the cephalic vein pierces the roof of the clavipectoral triangle and it goes deep inside, and I shall show that to you when I reflect the pectoralis major. The next item I would like to draw your attention to is, as I mentioned earlier, these are the digitations of the serratus anterior. And we can see some of the fibers of the serratus anterior are intermeshing with the fibers of the external oblique muscle of the abdomen. But what we notice are these structures coming out from the intercostal spaces, and we can see them here. These are the lateral cutaneous branches of the intercostal nerves. And the lateral cutaneous branches, as they emerge, they divide into an anterior and a posterior branch. While we are on this topic, I would draw your attention to here in this region. Here also we can see some nerves emerging. We can see a few small ones on this side here, and we can see some on the other side. These are the anterior cutaneous branches which pierce through the intercostal spaces, and they supply the skin in this region, and they also supply the breast. Talking about the breast reminds me, this is a female cadaver, and this is the breast. When we dissected out the skin, we dissected out the breast above the pectoralis major. So there is a thin layer of areolar tissue here, which is referred to as the retromammary space. And that retromammary space enabled us to do the dissection and reflect the skin as well as the breast. And that same retromammary space is used during mastectomy, where we remove the breast on the surface of the pectoralis major. Now let's reflect the pectoralis major. We have cut the pectoralis major at the sternocostal origin as well as the clavicular origin. And so I'm reflecting it now. And we can see, as I reflect it, we can see that the fibers are twisting, as I mentioned earlier. The lower fibers are running deep, the upper fibers are superficial. And I'm reflecting it, and this is the clavicular head. And once we reflect it, we see a few other structures. Straight away we notice this muscle here. This is the pectoralis minor. The standard textbook description of the pectoralis minor takes origin from third, fourth, and fifth ribs. But here we see that it is taking origin from the second, third, and fourth rib. And the fibers are then going up, and they will get inserted onto the costocoracoid process. So this is the pectoralis minor. The next thing I would like to draw your attention to is what I had mentioned earlier, the clavipectoral triangle. Now we can see the clavipectoral or the deltopectoral, the floor of the pectoral triangle much more clearly. And we can see that the cephalic vein pierces through the deltopectoral triangle. It pierces through the floor of the deltopectoral triangle and it will open into the axillary vein, which of course we cannot see here. So that brings me to the clavipectoral fascia or the costocoracoid membrane. Now that we can see here, it's an extensive fascia, deep fascia, and it's got several components. So let's start with the top. Superiorly, it is attached to the undersurface of the clavicle. And here, when it is attached to the clavicle, it also encircles and encloses a muscle which is deep to the clavicle, which we cannot see here in this region. That is the subclavius. So there it is, the fascia of the subclavius. When we trace it, we find that it is continuing down and it is forming the floor of the deltopectoral triangle. And this is the floor which is pierced by the cephalic vein. And in this region, it is referred to as the costocoracoid membrane. Then as it further continues down, we can see clearly here, it encloses the pectoralis minor, and we have lifted up part of it here. It ensheathes the pectoralis minor in front and behind, and it completely encloses the pectoralis minor. And then as it comes further down, this is the end that we can see here at the introlateral boundary of the pectoralis minor. Here it becomes continuous with what is known as this structure. This is the suspensory ligament of the axilla. And from here, it gets attached to the axillary fascia. So therefore, the clavipectoral fascia has got four components: the fascia of the subclavius, the costocoracoid membrane, the pectoralis minor fascia, and the suspensory ligament of the axilla. The suspensory ligament of the axilla is attached to the undersurface, the deep surface of the axillary fascia, and that is the one which is responsible for pulling up the axillary floor when we lift up the arm and we get the hollow. Upper limit from the fascia of the subclavius, it continues into the neck, and we can see some of the dissection of the neck here. It becomes continuous with the deep cervical fascia. Some textbooks say that it becomes continuous with the investing layer of deep cervical fascia. Some textbooks say it becomes continuous with the fascia over the inferior belly of omohyoid, which is the pretracheal layer, muscular component of the deep cervical fascia. So this is the full costocoracoid membrane which I was talking about. And before I go out of it, there are a few other things I would like to draw your attention to. We can see this nerve here. This is the medial pectoral nerve, which supplies both the pectoralis minor and the pectoralis major. We also see a nerve piercing the costocoracoid membrane and supplying the pectoralis major directly. That is the lateral pectoral nerve. So therefore, the structures which pierce the costocoracoid membrane are: 1. The lateral pectoral nerve, the cephalic vein, the branches of the thoracoacromial artery, which we have not dissected out here, and some lymphatics, especially the lymphatics which are located between the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. They also pierce through the costocoracoid membrane and they go to the central group of lymph nodes. So these are the structures which we wanted to show to you in the pectoral region, some salient points which are not normally shown